Like Hezekiah, Josiah organizes a grand Passover festival. The same emphasis on unity and joy is here, and also the participation of the Levites. Unlike Hezekiah, who, due to factors outside his control, was unable to celebrate at the correct time, together with his other problems with the unconsecrated priests, Josiah is able to do things in a more legal and orderly manner. This can be seen particularly from verses 10 to 15, where everything is done carefully and everyone has their role. Even the Levitical singers and musicians are described alongside the cultic activities, and the preparations have been so well calculated that the Levites assigned to guard the gates have also been taken care of by their brothers, so that their duty is not compromised. In verse 18, the Passover is evaluated as being the greatest since the days of Samuel. This surpasses even Hezekiah's, whose celebration was the greatest since the days of David and Solomon. What has made Josiah's superior? Was it the fact that the offerings were more numerous, or was it that Josiah was able to execute it on time and without so many difficulties? One aspect of both their celebrations was that the Passover was celebrated in Jerusalem, with the priests officiating instead of by families at their own homes, as according to Exodus 12. Some scholars think that this was a turning point for this festival, and that Josiah's celebration made the centralization the norm. This might well be the case, but there are some verses in the Torah which imply that the Passover was a pilgrimage festival, and that the lambs were slaughtered at a sanctuary. So there remains a question mark. Josiah was the last good Judean king. Chapter 36 gives us the dismal remainders, 4 in all, which lead down to the exile. The chronicler makes 4 particular changes worth noting. The first is that the appointment of Gedaliah as governor and his assassination, which prompts those who remain to flee to Egypt. This is simply dropped because the chronicler has greatly compressed this section from 2 kings. Second is the note about the last king of Judah, Jehoiakim, who is taken to Babylon but eventually released from prison and given a seat of honor at the king's table. This may also be due to compression, but there may be another reason which I will return to. Third, 2 Kings is explicit that the sin of Manasseh was the final straw. After him, the fate of Judah was sealed, and God decreed destruction and exile. So even though Josiah had done so much to turn things around, the sentence had already been passed. 2 Kings does not record the repentance of Manasseh, so we only know about it from 2 Chronicles. Because Manasseh's history ends so positively in 2 Chronicles, he focuses on these last 4 Judean kings as the collective reason for the exile, or rather the collective final straw. It is specifically verses 11 to 17 which show the mounting offences which lead to the Lord bringing in Nebuchadnezzar to execute judgment. Verse 15 reaffirms the compassion and patience the Lord had on his people and his dwelling place, emphasizing again the importance of the temple. But the mockery of the prophets was unrelenting until, as verse 16 says, the wrath of the Lord against his people became so great that there was no remedy. The fourth change is the ending, which is taken from the first chapter of Ezra. 2 Kings ended with the cheering note about the king being taken care of, but the chronicler skips over the exile and goes straight to the Edict of Cyrus. This is, in fact, how the Old Testament ends, if you are following the Jewish ordering. And to return to the question of why the chronicler dropped the account of Jehoiakim in exile, it is probably that he did not want to talk about the exile, and instead focused on the return. It was enough for him to add in verse 21 the fact that the word of the Lord had been fulfilled through Jeremiah, recorded in chapter 25 of his book, that the land would have its overdue Sabbath rest for 70 years, thus indicating the length of the exile. This is also based on Leviticus 26, which warns that failure to keep the Sabbath will result in the land spitting out its disobedient inhabitants, so it can have its rest. Prophecy has been an important feature of the Chronicles' writings, and all the mockery of it which led to the exile, that is, spurning the many warnings by the prophets sent by a compassionate God, are answered in this ultimate prophecy being fulfilled. The last word, so to speak, goes to the everlasting truth and inevitability of God's speech.